I would like to warmly welcome everyone who is with us for this evening's session. Our sponsor is the Association of Pittsburgh Priests, and our topic is Palestinians, Christians and Muslims in the Holy Land. Who are they? How are they living, and how can we help? Our speaker is Jeffrey Abood. He's a famed speaker and writer on the Church's perspective on the situation in the Holy Land. And the date of this session is Wednesday, December 6th, 2023.
And I just want to thank everybody for your interest and giving your time to come learn more about everything that's going on now, because it's a tough time. So I'd like to share with you a little bit about the Christians in the Holy Land, and we're going to especially focus on Gaza tonight, since this is what's on everybody's mind. So I'm going to hopefully share this with you. Can everybody see that slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we talk about the Holy Land. What most people think about is Israel, which is in the purple in the middle, and then Palestine, which is the West Bank on the right, and Gaza Strip on the left. It also includes parts of Jordan and Cyprus, but since most people think of Palestine and Israel, that's kind of what we'll speak about tonight. But before I get all the way over there, I want to start you off in my kitchen. And this is a picture of my aunt. She's 100 in this picture, and my grandson, he's 1. And I thought it was a beautiful picture of continuity, of how things continue from one generation to the next. And this is very much what the Church in the Holy Land provides to the church worldwide. They've been there since the beginning. Actually, Arab Christians were one of the ethnic communities present at the first Pentecost in Acts 2:11, and they've kept the Christian witness there and the sacramental life of the church ongoing for over 2,000 years. Now, ethnically, the Christian communities there are Palestinian. They live in Israel, they live in the West Bank, they live in Gaza, but they're Palestinian. And their population has gone over the last 70 years from about 18% down to less than 2% today.
No, I'm fine.
They're kind of some of the cities and towns we associate with early Christianity, such as the old city of Jerusalem, where the Holy Sepulchre is, Bethlehem, Jericho, and Gaza, they're located in the Palestinian areas.
Oh.
And these are some of the kids in Gaza, since we're going to be focusing on that tonight. They're great people. They're in all walks of life. They very much keep the faith and hope alive down there. And it's very important because the people there, especially in Gaza, are very much living, as the Latin Patriarch, the head of the Catholic Church in the Holy Land, says. He says they're very much living the way of the cross. So why is that? Well, Pope Benedict spoke about this. He said, he said, we recite the seemingly endless list of difficulties separating Israelis and Palestinians, which makes it all the more urgent to address the problem of the fundamental injustice at the heart of this question. To just make a litany of symptoms without addressing the root cause isn't really helpful to anyone. Can't just, well, they did this to us, we did that to them, well, they did it first. Doesn't really get anywhere. So we need to address the root cause. So what is that? Well, all the heads of all the churches in Jerusalem came out with this statement a few years ago. They said that occupation remains the root cause of the conflict and then continued suffering in the Holy Land. And getting all the bishops to agree on something is not always the easiest task, but this is something that they did, so it's important. So what is the occupation? Well, just by definition, it's maintaining control over a place by military force. It's unfortunately nothing new to the Holy Land. It was the Romans in Jesus's time. It's been the British and the Turks through history, and it's the Israeli military today.
Oh, good chatting.
So since we're going to get into the Holy Land, it's always important. We want to stay out of anti-Semitism. So I want to tell you what the Vatican says because it's very clear. On their commission for religious relations with the Jews, the follow-up to Nostra Aetate, they said that the existence of the state of Israel should be envisioned not in a perspective which is religious, but in reference to the common principles of international law. It's a state, just like America, United States or England's a state. It's a political entity. And we have to be careful because we have our interreligious ties with Jews and Judaism on one hand, and then we have ties or relations with Israel, the Israeli government, and its policies on the other hand. So we want to be careful not to confuse those two because we don't want to inadvertently fall into anti-Semitism, which is very real and very serious. We're going to speak about Gaza specifically tonight, Gaza and the church there. It goes back to the flight to Egypt. When the Holy Family was leaving Jerusalem to escape Herod, they would have gone through Gaza because that was the only route to Egypt. And St. Porphyrius Church is there, built on the site they hold is where the Holy Family stayed during that. So this is a map, this is a UN map of Gaza today. It's about 24 miles long. It's about 6 miles wide. It's home to 2.3 million people. It's one of the most densely populated areas on Earth. About half of those people are children. You can see on the map, the red area is a wall that's built entirely around Gaza, and it's been under blockade for the last 17 years. So not too much gets in or out without Israeli permission to do so. There's also a naval blockade. You can see by the map, that's how far Gazan boats are allowed to go out and fish or to kids to swim or whatever. But that's what it looks like. This is the entrance to go in on the left. It's about a mile long. You go in. It looks very much, I thought, to the picture on the right, which is a picture from Manchester State Prison. And it's been described as a prison quite often. But it's interesting because a friend of my wife's, a childhood friend, was a retired warden, prison warden. And I asked her about this, and she goes, well, it seems kind of worse than a prison because at least in prison, people were found guilty of something. And at least in prison, people don't have to worry about food and water and their basic needs. And that's not quite the case here. This is a picture of the wall that goes around Gaza. Those are automated gun turrets. And this keeps the population enclosed. This is what it looks like from inside. And that's what it looks like as you're coming into Gaza with the wall around it. At nighttime, this is on the beach. Those lights off in the distance, you think they might be boats, which they are, but they're naval boats. That's the naval blockade, keeping mostly fishermen from going out or any other ships to come in. The entire area is not only continually surveyed by drones, which is a consistent noise you'll always hear in the background when you're there. But you may remember a year or two ago, maybe there was that Chinese weather balloon that went over Canada. It was a spy balloon or whatever and went over the United States. These balloons are all along the border. That's the picture of one of them. So it's very heavily surveilled. And this is the way in. This is the one door that 2.3 million people have access to the outside world through. This artist did this picture. I thought kind of put it in perspective for me anyway. 2.3 million people are packed in here, wall around it, and military on all sides of it. This is Gaza City from the outside. It's the biggest city in Gaza. It's the one in the north that's been heavily bombed lately. This is about 1 million people live here. And it's very much third world. This is the main street, downtown Gaza City. There is a small, nice area of Gaza. This is kind of where the professional class lives, like doctors and lawyers, that kind of thing. I had to take this picture because of the name on the clothes store. Um, there's not much electricity there either. Even before October 7th, they would get about 3 or 4 hours a day. The electricity, like everything else, is under blockade. Um, but some stores were able to have their own generators and stuff, which of course ran on fuel, which there's no more fuel. But that's not, I wanted to show you the nice area. This is one of the from the balcony of one of the places I've stayed when I've gone. This is the nice area. This is first thing in the morning. It was about 7 or 8 o'clock, and you're in the middle of a city of 1 million people. You get up at 7 or 8 in the morning. You would expect to hear a lot of street noises. You'd expect to hear traffic and sirens and things going on. I was quite struck because as I stood at the balcony, the only thing I heard were roosters. That's how the power is not there. That's an example of just how third world it is. Donkey carts are a common sight there. Kids, somebody helped to make this swing. You got to admire the ingenuity of people. This is the coast. It looks very nice. It looks picturesque. And actually, this is El Mawasi. This is the part where they're currently, as of today, telling everyone to evacuate to, even though there's no kind of infrastructure at all. It looks nice. And I went to a pizza place. The priest there, Father Mario, took me one night on the coast. But when you get within a block or two of the water, it starts to smell. And it starts to smell like sewage because the water treatment plants have all been destroyed in periodic Israeli attacks, and they don't allow the parts in to repair them and rebuild them. So the water smells, and kids still go swimming in it, even though they're not supposed to because they're kids, and that's what they're going to do. The United Nations released a report saying that Gaza would be uninhabitable in less than 5 years. That report was in 2015. So it's only gotten worse since then. Now, in this environment is, of course, the church. And the church has always been one of those places that has a lot of respect from the communities they're in. One of the reasons is the church has always been one of the first, if not the first, places to open themselves for shelter, to help assist the people displaced from their homes, to help, give them a place to stay, give them a place of safety, hopefully. Currently in Holy Family, there's about 600 people living. They're sheltering there. They're in the north of Gaza. The church's presence is out in the community. The church is respected there by all parties, and the Christians there are visible. These are some of the young people in Gaza City. There's a number of religious orders there. Missionaries of Charity are one of the groups. They, the main Catholic church, Holy Family Church, is in Gaza City, and it sits on a complex about the size of, if you can think of a local parish that has a grade school, it's kind of about that size. It's a complex. It's got the church. It's got the housing for the priests. It's got the school. It's got a couple of convents, and the sisters run this home for severely disabled kids. They have about 60 or 70 of those kids. And when I was there the first time, the priest was taking me through and showing me everything. And one of the sisters was holding one of the kids. And I asked if I could take a picture. And she says no. And I said, okay, that's fine. That's fine. So we spend some time there, and we're leaving. And the priest goes, you know why she said you couldn't take a picture, don't you? And I said, well, no, that's fine. But no, I don't know why. And he goes, and I've never heard this in my life. She goes, they don't want people taking pictures of them and the kids and using those pictures to raise money for them. They totally depend on God's providing, and he does. Not only do they take excellent care of these kids, but they've been able to expand and take care of adults with the same problems. And these are kids with like cerebral palsy and birth defects. These are severely kids. Many of them have been abandoned by their families, but the church is there. Actually, one of the recent developments prior to everything that's going on now, the Dominicans, they found old mosaics way back to Jesus' time on an old church floor. So they, with cooperation of the Palestinian Authority, they built this structure around it to preserve those mosaics and kind of help restore some of that. St. Thomas Aquinas Center is a center for mostly high school and college age kids. It teaches them job skills because the Gaza Strip has been so blockaded and is so overpopulated. About their unemployment rate's about 70%. I think the United States unemployment rate in the Great Depression was something like 20 or 30%. There's a 70%.
Jeez.
So this Thomas Aquinas Center helps them to learn skills that would make them hopefully competitive in what little job market there is. Teaches them English, teaches them computer skills, and things that they can hopefully, be able to make a living. If they can make a living, they can start a family. If they can start a family, they'll stay. A lot of young people can't do that, and when they can, they get out and they leave. This is the school run by the Rosary Sisters. This has been bombed in the last month. I know one of the buildings has collapsed. I don't have any photos of that, but this was the school prior to that. At one point during this recent conflict, prior to the bombing, there were about 2,500 people living there, sheltering, but luckily it was evacuated before it was attacked. This is Holy Family Church. This is on the complex that I was telling you about. This is the Catholic Church, which they're called the Latins. So this is a Latin church. This is during the summer camp that we support. They get about 200 kids every year, and it's a month-long camp. And because these kids live in this pressure cooker with periodic bombings, with low access to food and job prospects and kind of everything, it gives them a positive outlet. It lets them develop relationships and give them some kind of positive thing to funnel their energy to and help decrease those stress levels. They're great kids. These are some of the activities they do. And they get to have fun once in a while, which all kids should have. One of the reasons I think with the unemployment rate so high, a lot of the young people want something to do. So they're very involved in these summer camps. They're very involved with the kids. They contribute in any way they can. This is Father Mario's favorite part of the day during the summer camps is he gets to stand on his balcony and throw candy out to all the kids. They love it, and he loves it too. This is a picture from one of the summer camps. Since this was taken, the kids in the summer camp, their families have emigrated and left Gaza, so they're no longer there. Almost all of them, since October 7th, have become homeless. Almost all their homes have been bombed, and some of them are dead. Which brings us to now. This is Gaza City now. I got these stats from the UN last week. They're already outdated. Of course, on October 7th, everybody's aware the attack on Israel from Hamas resulted in 1,200 people dying. Since then, the Palestinian side, there have been, I think it's up to 16,000 now, have been killed. About 70% of them are women and children. About 93% are civilians. Over 60% of the housing units in Gaza, people's homes, are damaged or destroyed. 300 and some educational facilities are damaged. All the bakeries are destroyed. All the mills are destroyed. People have no way to make flour or bread. Most of the hospitals are destroyed or damaged. At this point, I think over 85 ambulances have been damaged. The water and sewage facilities are damaged. 3 churches, 85 mosques have been damaged. People were waiting, as of a week ago, 4 to 6 hours to get half a loaf of bread. That was their daily ration. High-risk patients are especially affected with no electricity or fuel available in Gaza. That's been blockaded. There's at least 1,000 people on dialysis, 2,000 cancer patients, and you probably saw in the news about the neonates in the incubators, that the incubators can no longer run because there's no electricity or fuel available. This was a video in downtown Gaza that my friend sent me just a few days ago. This is kind of, hopefully give you an idea here what this looks like. There's no sound, but this is the downtown area. This is Salah al-Din. This is the main street that goes north to south from Gaza. And to give you an idea how big it is, you can literally probably drive from the northmost point of Gaza to the southmost point in 30 to 40 minutes. That's all the bigger the area is, and it has 2.3 million people. This is what it looks like now. This is Salah al-Din Street now. This is what it looked like when they were trying to evacuate people. These are, of course, everybody. It's babies, it's old people, it's people in stretchers, wheelchairs. You know how tough it is to get out of a concert or some kind of entertainment venue. Imagine trying to do that with 1 million people. It just doesn't happen. So a lot of people stay because there is no safe place to go, because they told everybody to go south, and they're bombing the south. Everywhere they tell people to go, it changes, and people don't know what to do. And there's not a lot of communication there right now either, because there's no fuel, there's no electricity. A lot of people don't have access to internet or cell phones or anything. So the word, even if there is, it's not practical that it gets around. One of the places I stay when I go is in this building. This is a nice area of town. This is before October 7th, but you can see what the previous intermittent bombs do to the normal facilities. We stay on the other side of the building, but that's the building. This is a picture from the balcony of that building when I was there last. This is what it looks like now. A little bit about the hospitals there, because they've been in the news a lot. Al-Ahli Hospital is the Anglican hospital there. Very nice hospital. This was inside the hospital prior to it being bombed. This is when the outside of it was bombed. And this is what it looks like from the hospital looking out. This is the Indonesian hospital. This is after Israeli troops went through and ransacked the ER and threw all the medical supplies out in the street. This is in the basement of Al Shifa Hospital. That's the one that's been in the news quite a bit. This is in front of their renal dialysis center. This is, I think it's in the basement, first floor of the basement. This is the outside of Al Shifa as it was. This is the front of it now as it is. This is the front of the hospital. All those tents and stuff, that's not a flea market. Those are all patients under there. The hospital, not even functioning. It doesn't have room. As we talked a little bit about the food that's available, generally the UN's able to give 3 liters of water and a piece of bread a day. That's what it was. I don't know if that'll get any better or not, but that's what it was when I put this together. Gaza, one of the things it was kind of known for was the strawberries. and flowers and citrus that it grew. These are those fields before. These are the fields after. The Israeli bulldozers just came and bulldozed them all. So they have no mills, they have no bakeries. Their agriculture has been bulldozed. They're not allowed to fish because of the naval blockade. So this is the environment that the people are in and that the church is present in. And the church is here. This is the convent. This is one of the rooms at the convent, as is this. This is St. Papyrus Church. This is the Orthodox Church. This is the church built over the place that the Holy Family is, they believe, stayed. The top picture is their brand new Orthodox Cultural Center that was attached to the church. The bottom picture is, of course, that now, after it was bombed. This is the priest here. You'll notice the white things at the bottom. Those are body bags from when the church was bombed. So in this currently apocalyptic landscape, is there any hope? Well, I think there is. Pope Francis recently spoke on it, and he said, enough, brothers. He says, in Gaza, let the wounded be rescued immediately. Let civilians be protected. Let far more humanitarian aid be allowed to reach the stricken population. And let us not lose hope. Let us pray and work tirelessly so that the sense of humanity may prevail over hardness of heart. And Father Twall, the person I know in the Patriarchate, he said, yeah, there can be hopelessness, but that's the life, and we have to build from it. And as Christians, we live in a land that has experienced resurrection, so we always have hope. And part of that hope is us. They depend on international voices. They depend on the international community to help support them because they're doing everything they can themselves. One of the big things is the church there is present. And I spoke a little about the sisters that were there running the home for the disabled kids. I want to read you just a paragraph. This is the commissary of the Holy Land from India. He just spoke with the sisters last week. These are the sisters taking care of these kids, these disabled kids. And they asked them about food, and this is what the sisters said. They said, sometimes some generous and courageous people bring something for them to eat. It takes courage because they could easily get killed on the way. Whatever they receive from outside, the sisters first serve the residents. If there's anything left, they eat. Sometimes they get just one meal a day. Most of the time, it is just one meal a day. Food supplies are becoming a great challenge. One day, they had just one loaf of bread shared among 3 of them. The other day, it was just an orange, and the 3 sisters shared it among them. Because the church is present, it has a lot of respect from the communities around it. Because every few years, Gaza gets bombed, and many of these sisters are international, so they can leave, and they're told to leave, but they don't. They stay, and they accompany the people that they're serving. I think it all sums up in this. The Holy Land Coordination goes every January and reports back to the Holy Father what's going on in the Holy Land. And every year they put out a statement. They're all similar to this one, but I think this one sums it up really well. For 50 years, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza have languished under occupation, violating the human dignity of both Palestinians and Israelis. Our coordination has called for justice and peace every year since 1988. I think it's behind the screen. I think that's here. Yet the suffering continues. So this call must get louder. As bishops, we implore Christians in our home countries to recognize our own responsibility for prayer, awareness, and action. So many people in the Holy Land have spent their entire lives under this occupation. And you remember we talked about that at the beginning of the presentation, was occupation's the root cause of the conflict. but they still profess hope and strive for reconciliation. Now more than ever, they deserve our solidarity. And they do. And that's why I'm so appreciative of venues like this where that solidarity can be built. So how do you do this? So we work to support the backbone of the church, and we do that in 4 ways. And this is also what the USCCB recommends. So the first is prayer, because any change is going to be rooted in that. And right now, it's the one aid that can get in. None of the other aid can get in. So God has a way in. Right now, there's no projects because everything's on hold. Aid can't get in, so they can't. But in the future, there will definitely be. Pilgrimages. We always recommend whenever if you get a chance to go on a pilgrimage, we encourage people not to go with like a tour company, but to go with one that different factions of the church put out. The Franciscans do them. Terra Sancta Pilgrimages is run by a Franciscan in Detroit. He does it. The Latin Patriarchate does it. Because what they do is when they go, they support the Christian communities there. They support the Christian businesses and tourism, and you'll get to visit and meet people that live there. You'll miss that if you just go on a tour. And finally, and the most important thing now is persuasion, is advocacy, is calling for a ceasefire now, because, being Catholic, being pro-life, it's not just abortion, it's also end-of-life issues. It's those things that devalue or shorten life, like poverty and war. And I can't think of a more pro-life issue right now than calling for a ceasefire and stop bombing people. So that's important. And the other thing is, it can't just be a ceasefire, but it has to address, again, going back to the beginning of this presentation, the root causes of the conflict. If we just go back to what it was before, we've heard for decades, Gaza's a powder keg and it's going to explode. Well, if you don't address the root causes, it will, and it has. And it'll do that again unless we start to actually address the root causes and try and fix things and not just band-aid things over. So that's my email. If you have any questions or anything, please feel free to contact me. And I think that is all I have. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
What are the percentage of Christian, Muslim, and Jewish people in Gaza? Do you know?
Yeah. So it's overwhelmingly Muslim. There's no Jews in Gaza. The Christians are just over 1,000 because of that blockade that's been 17 years. Christians tend to have a lot of connections in the West. They tend to have a good educational background. So a lot of them that can leave. I mean, especially when you see your kids growing up in that environment, you want something better for them. So that's pretty much how the population stands right now.
Thank you.
Sister Barb, before we go to you, I think it would really be helpful to have Art McDonald's question answered, which is to speak a little bit about Hamas, its history, and how most of the people there actually view Hamas.
Yeah. So Hamas was a military wing. It kind of became a political wing in the early 2000s. One of the original financiers of Hamas was the Netanyahu government. It was promoted as a way to divide the Palestinian people with the Palestinian Authority kind of a foil to them. It's very similar to the approach that the U.S. had in Afghanistan with promoting the Taliban as a counter to the Russians. And you get blowback on that because it doesn't work. But that's how it started. Anyway, it's, I think, important to recognize the fact that Hamas is not just some random group, but they were elected as the government. in 2006. It was a free and fair election overseen by President Carter at the time, well, ex-President Carter at that time, and they were elected. There was a split between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority because the Palestinian Authority thought they should have won. So anyway, Hamas kicked the Palestinian Authority out of Gaza. Palestinian Authority kicked Hamas out of the West Bank. I can give you some examples of their relations with the church and with the people there, and my own personal experience that may help also clarify and answer your question. Can you hear me okay still, Gretchen?
Yes.
Okay. So personally, I've been through Hamas checkpoints. I've been through Islamic Jihad checkpoints, sometimes on my own, sometimes with the priest in the full clerical gear with the collar and everything. Never had an issue. In fact, we went to one and he looks at me, he's kind of laughing. He goes, yeah, I got this collar. He goes, they think I'm important. They think I'm a big, important person. It's like, okay. So, with the church there, it's not a love story between the church and Hamas, but there is a respect there. I think they recognize the value the church has there through the social services and programs. I mean, they provide. The church provides in the Palestinian areas. The church provides 40, even though they're less than 2% of the population in the West Bank, they provide 45% of the social, educational, health services. So it's a big presence that far outweighs their numbers. And that's acknowledged. And I think it's just that they just leave the church alone. You know, it's like, that's them, do their thing. Doing the classes at the Thomas Aquinas Center, I had opportunities to talk with the young people there, the high school and college age kids. And I said, okay, so how does this like actually play out in real life? And they said, well, you know, they go, it's not like ISIS or that where it's like a convert or die kind of thing. They go, the pressure isn't really for us as Christians to convert. The pressure is more within us. It's more an internal pressure because we think, you know, we're such a small minority. Most of my friends are Muslim. Most of the people I may be interested in dating are Muslim. Why am I Christian? And it makes you question that. And luckily, the churches, even though they're small, their faith life is very vibrant, and the kids are very involved, and they do a lot for the kids. There's a lot of community building there. So that seems to be the biggest challenge with that. So I don't know if hopefully that answered your question.
Oh, thank you. Mm-hmm. Sister Barbara, you had a question?
Jeff, just your thoughts about the UN and most of the Western world are advocating for a two-state solution, and yet people like Friends of Seville are advocating for a one state. So I was just wondering if you have any thoughts around that.
Yeah, I mean, I know that's a big question. I don't really have a thought on that one way or the other. I don't know if a two states something that can practically be done at this point, but that's for it to be negotiated and the people there to decide. I mean, they're the ones that have to live with it. But I would hope if it's one state, it would be one state for with equal rights for everybody.
Thank you. I actually had a clarifying question. You mentioned earlier that there are no Israelis, there are no Jews in Gaza, but I thought the whole thing started by the attack on a Jewish settlement. Was that not in Gaza, or was that outside?
Yeah, so that was there's settlements in Israel proper all around Gaza, and hence the wall. They have the wall there. So what happened on that attack was Hamas broke down the walls with bulldozers and came through. So that was an awful day, and that's what happened. So that's why they were in Israel at that time.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
We had another question from John Osterley before. You know what? So it's kind of a disaster, as you described with the Hamas situation, but what future arrangement or kind of political organization would or could, in fact, help the people of Gaza, in your perspective?
From a political perspective, do you mean?
Governmental?
Governmental. I think the only way it's going to work and the only way to address those root causes of the conflict are to have a peace process that does two things. And the reason I'm saying this is because this is the example that's set out in Northern Ireland with the Irish and the English and the Good Friday Agreement that's been now 25 years of peace. Was Senator George Mitchell went at the time, and one of the things he did was he made a peace process that included all the groups. So it included the IRA on one end, it included the Ulster Defense Association on the other end, and everybody in between, because those are the people you have to make peace with. It's got to be everybody, so you have to include everybody in the conversation. So that's one thing that has to be done. So you're going to have to bring in a Hamas on one end, you're going to have to bring in the Irish, Jewish settlers on the other hand, and everybody in between. And then the other thing that worked is it has to be based on a moral framework versus a political framework. And what I mean by that is if things are based on a moral framework, each party coming to the table is treated as an equal. Each party is treated as having legitimate claims, legitimate rights that they want to see fulfilled. Each party also has to recognize that there are going to be limits to those things that they want to do. Not everybody doesn't get whatever they want, but it has to be something that allows for the fulfillment of the other parties also. So that's a negotiation process, and that's only based if you come to the table as equals. If you come to the table and it's based on a political framework instead of a moral framework, the party with the most political power is going to get what they want. And that's why all the peace processes in the Middle East have failed so far to this point. So it's got to be a better direction. And I think it's to be based on a moral framework.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We had a question about the U.S. Catholic bishops. Why are they not speaking out against these atrocities? Why have they not spoken out for decades? As you pointed out, this is not a new situation over there. It's just that the powder keg finally exploded. And what could be done to try to move them in a direction of speaking and acting?
Yeah, to move them, I would suggest contacting them if they see that there's that people care about this issue. And I would say it's two things. One is the how do I say this? So the rights of the Catholic Church in the Holy Land, in Israel, is not something that they have. There was a fundamental agreement signed between the State of Israel and the Vatican in '93. On the Vatican side, it would recognize Israel as a state, which it did. And on the Israeli side, it would guarantee the rights of the Catholic Church and the properties of the Catholic Church in the Holy Land. It's never been approved, even though it was signed, it was never approved by the Israeli Knesset. So the very presence of the church is not something that's guaranteed in the Holy Land. It can, in the worst case scenario, be taken away tomorrow. There's no guarantees for it because the treaty's never been enacted. So that's one reason. And the other reason is I think sometimes the bishops do say things, because one of the things I do every year, and I put together for our order kind of a magazine style thing that collects all the statements and things that the Catholic Church has put out over the years. And there's actually a lot of stuff out there, more than you would realize, but it doesn't get any publicity. It's like towards the end of my presentation, the slide on the Holy Land Coordination, and it said, for 50 years of occupation demands action. We want our bishops to do more. and all this kind of thing. We've been calling for peace and justice every year since '98. So it's there. It's just not getting the play. So that's one of the I think, honestly, I think just promoting what the church already puts out there um, is going to help quite a bit. Just nobody knows it's the best kept secret of the church, I think.
Wow. Thanks. We had a question here from Jim about the fact that, Israel says that Hamas, who are, of course, effectively the leaders, elected actually leaders in Gaza, that they are dedicated to the destruction of the Israeli state and return of the land to the pre-1947 owners. Therefore, unless Hamas is destroyed, Israel lives in constant threat of elimination. So, I mean, aside from the really out of proportion response, how can this pretty fundamental disconnect be addressed?
Yeah, and this is one of those disconnects that needs to be addressed. It was in Hamas's original charter for the destruction of the state of Israel. They amended it. President Carter said they amended it, I think in 2018, to recognize the state within 67 borders. It'll never go back to 47, and it shouldn't. Israel is a legitimate state, and the Palestinians have agreed to that. It's the boundaries of that state, I think, and the question of whether the state, as it says, the Jewish state, should be just for Jewish people, because there's almost 25% of their population that is Palestinian. So there's Christians live there, there's Muslims live there, and as the patriarch said, if you want just a Jewish state, where does that leave us? As Christians, we're not Jews. So those are the debatable things. And Hamas probably talks bigger than they can deliver. I mean, they have no ability to wipe out the state of Israel. And, it's been on the right wing, especially with the current Israeli government, it's very right wing, on their side to wipe out the Palestinians. They said they want to wipe out Gaza. So it's, since they both kind of have that there, that's something you have to get them to the table and talk about, because the Palestinians aren't going anywhere, the Jews aren't going anywhere, so they're going to have a future together. So you've got to define what the framework of that future is going to be, and that's where the negotiations need to take place. And the first thing that needs to happen is you got to stop bombing each other, so you can get to negotiations. So that's my answer.
Thank you. John Conway, you had your hand raised, but was your question answered?
Pretty much so. I was asking about the peace process that Jeff thought would be effective. Mm-hmm. I thought his answer was absolutely perfect. I just want to say one other thing in addition to this. I think if Israel wants to survive and have security, the last thing that's going to build security is bombing and killing people. All that's going to do is grow Hamas within Gaza, because the people see them as defenders, and they've seen Hamas get their prisoners released. And as long as this occupation and the constant attacks continue, Hamas will become more powerful every day. And I don't understand why Israel doesn't understand that. And I would like to know if Jeff agrees. Thank you.
I mean, the more the ongoing slaughter of civilians in Gaza continues, the stronger and more popular Hamas seems to get. So I heard a former UN weapons inspector online, and he had a good point. He said, he goes, you want to defeat Hamas? He goes, Israel should stop bombing and flood that place with so much humanitarian aid. It rebuilds everything. It puts people to work. It feeds people. Hamas will disappear tomorrow. But the more it goes the other way, as John had said, the stronger they get. So, what are you going to do? It's above my pay grade.
Michael, you have a question.
Yes. thank you, Jeff, for your enlightening presentation and remarks on the situation. I personally have been devastated as I watch daily the bombing and the destruction of Gaza. I see it mainly on Democracy Now!, which is one of the best presentations on the situation there, in my estimation. And what they present looks like a moonscape. It's absolutely, for me, devastating. But what is more devastating is that this is bankrolled by our government, by the US government, and by the president and by the Congress and all the powers that be. And that is just as disturbing as the devastation. And the devastation is I heard just today, Jeff Abood, Jeff Halper, say that it fulfills all the definitions of a genocide. So my question to you, Jeff, is, I mean, we have or should have some power here in the United States to stop this weapons flow for this genocide that is going on there. What is your suggestion on the best way we can have some effect in changing the terrible, terrible policy being pursued by Biden and his cohorts?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't mean my answer to be like a soundbite, because it's not. But I think really, I'm not a big believer in politics, but I think this is one of the few times that contacting your representatives, all of them, and telling them exactly what you think about it is having an effect, because I think it is having an effect, because they've already begun to change at least their wording, even though not their actions, I don't think, at this point. But I think it's going that way. And I think they're realizing this is going to cost them some votes. And, I'm going to leave my personal politics out of this, but I honestly think that's the best thing to do right now. And I think it is having an effect. And I think it's building a mass that will eventually, hopefully sooner, much sooner rather than later, make a change.
Thanks. So Jackie, you had your hand raised before and then not anymore. So would you like to ask a question? You need to unmute.
Okay, hi. Jeff, you did amazingly well, because powerful. I'm thinking about the children that you got to know in the camps, and the children more widespread who are being pushed down into southern Gaza, and then probably down into Sinai or whatever eventually. The trauma that these kids are going through, did you experience that in the children? The trauma, even though that Dr. Saeed, I think he was a psychiatrist in Gaza, and he said even back in 2014 that the kids were so traumatized, and the psychiatrists, the lack of doctors, the lack of counselors, oh my gosh, the disappearance of families and parents, and from these kids' lives. How do you see this going into the future with all these children who have had such horrid? I know they're resilient in so many ways, but still, this is over the top.
Yeah, so most of those kids prior to this suffered from PTSD. Now I'm sure they all suffer from PTSD. That's something that you associate with Vietnam vets, right? Not with 4-year-olds.
Yeah.
The one thing I did see myself is I was in a home, and the 4-year-old girl wanted to go to the bathroom because a lot of kids, their bed wet. She wanted to go to the bathroom, but she wouldn't go in without her dad. So her dad goes in with her, and she goes, and they come out, and he goes, yeah, she won't go in without me because she doesn't know that I'll be there when she comes out. So that's what these kids were living with before. I want to give you, especially since you're talking about kids, I'll tell you a story. So a friend of mine that stays there, his 13-year-old daughter had cancer, and she passed. And the blockade, when I was there last, this is before October 7th, the blockade was so tight that the hospitals were refilling IV bags because they were not letting plastic in, they were not letting that kind of, so they had to reuse the IV bags. She passed away from cancer, and they didn't have enough morphine to give her for the pain because they didn't have the morphine. And that's all before this. Now they have no aid. They're going from place to place to place to place. I got a video, or not a video, a voicemail just yesterday from the priest in Gaza. Someone there, it was a voicemail, and they were saying, talking to him, and they're telling him all about all the people that have lost their homes there. He's naming them. And in the background, it's only a minute long, but there's that constant humming of drones, and there were 4 explosions. And the guy's voice never broke. He never changed rhythm, cadence. He just went through his conversation like there was nothing going on. They've got to be so numb to that at this point after 2 months. I can't imagine, and I can't imagine what future that's going to build. But as I think John Conway had said earlier, was what's the future? The more this happens, the more people are going to be sympathetic to Hamas. I mean, you tell me these kids aren't going to grow up hating the people that bombed them? You think the kids in Israel aren't going to grow up hating the Hamas that came through and killed their family and friends? It's gotta change, and there has to be a better way forward, and it has to be a moral framework. I'm convinced.
Daniel, did you have a question?
Yes, I did, but it seems so academic, like others here. I've just been devastated. I've done some reading to try to understand how did we ever get into such a situation like this. The question that I would pose, and I say it's not going to do any good, how is it that Gaza, that sliver of land, got cut off from the rest of Palestine?
Yeah, you know what? That's a good question. Honestly, I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. Maybe I see someone raising their hand, Sister Paulette. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a thought about that. At 1948, when the Nakba happened, okay, so 750,000 Palestinians were driven out of their homes from the north and Jaffa and Aqsa and along the coastline. Well, perhaps I'm saying they were driven down and they went to Jordan and Syria and pushed down into the south, and along the seashore would be their natural home, because they had lived along the seashore and had fished quite a lot. So it just became filled with refugee camps for the most part. I mean, there were 12 refugee camps or whatever in Gaza, quite a few anyway. And so then there was supposed to be a corridor between the West Bank and Gaza, but it never happened. I think it was the Hebron Protocol that, not the Hebron, but some protocol that said that there had to be a way for the two to be connected.
We had a related question earlier. Richard was asking about, whether you could speak to what's happening in the West Bank at present.
Oh yeah, Thanks, Richard. I totally forgot. Yeah, the West Bank. So essentially, the West Bank's been pretty much under lockdown since October 7th also. I know the heads of one of the hospitals there. He runs the place and he hasn't been able to get to it because Bethlehem's shut down. What's going on in Gaza on a much smaller scale with the same principle is going on in the West Bank. All the communities are locked down from each other. There's nothing going in or out. There's, of course, no tourism. People are getting arrested quite a bit. There have been, I think, 250 Palestinians killed there, including 60 children. And Hamas isn't in the West Bank, remember. So they can't blame them for this one. But it seems like the pressure to get people out of everywhere is just increasing. And it's kind of like there's no, at least at this point, it seems like there's no stop to it. I think the U.S. could stop it, but the political will there doesn't seem to be there at this point. So that's why we got to keep on those guys.
Yeah, there's tens of millions of Christians throughout the country and more millions throughout the world who feel that the secular state of Israel is identified with the Israel from the Old Testament, and they can do no wrong. So they support just about everything that Israel does. They feel that God blesses those people who bless Israel, and it's a heresy, and it's done immeasurable damage. And I'm wondering why the Catholic Church couldn't confront this heresy and help the people in the pews to understand the harm that this has done for years and years to the people of Palestine and the Jewish people, and maybe encourage people to contact their representatives, because the Christian Zionists certainly do. They have an outsized influence on our representatives, and therefore we're in this dilemma that we're in.
Yeah, that's well said. And I think the right-wing evangelical community in this country is probably the biggest reason why politicians tend to vote the way they do. I did want to say something about the scripture you brought up, because, you know, the scripture is God will bless those who bless Israel and curse those who curse him. And I thought about this a lot in the past, and I realized, you know, if you love your kids, and if you see your kids doing drugs or doing, you know, alcohol or whatever, that's something that's hurting them or hurting other people, if you love them, you're going to say something to them. You're not just going to give them a pass, you know, we support you, do whatever you want, but no, this is hurting you, or this is hurting other people, because you love them. And people that love Israel, you know, if you want to bless them, then part of that is confronting it to say, hey, look, you know, this is hurting you guys in the long run. It's hurting the people around you. There has to be a better way forward. But when we just enable, then it, you know, is a big part of the problem, like you said.
I don't see other questions at the minute. I did want to go back to your 4 Ps, because that's I'm in marketing, so I use another 4 Ps, but I really like yours better. And you talked about prayer, projects, pilgrimage, and persuasion. Any other thoughts about what we can do now? Obviously the prayer, because as you said, that's the only aid that's really getting through right now. And maybe even a bit more on the persuasion, but whatever your thoughts are about what we can do along those lines.
Yeah, and in the future, you know, this is going to pan out, as all things will, in one way or another. We have to help them rebuild the future. The best thing to do is to look how to do that with projects and with aid and that kind of thing. And like I said, pilgrimage is a big one because tourism is a big part of the economy over there, whether you're Israeli or whether you're Palestinian. And if we can get people go over there on pilgrimages and meet with the Christians living there, you're going to get a lot different perspective than you will on just a tour. And I think to get people over there to see, I know Sister Paulette will testify to this, it makes the biggest impact on people that there can be. Projects we support locally, we support the Holy Family School and summer camp, and it's a small thing, but I think it's an important thing. But there's a lot of other Caritas works there, Catholic Relief Services work there. You know, Palestine Children's Relief Fund works there. Doctors Without Borders work there. The UN works there. There's so many ways to support that, short of going over there, you know, that I would encourage you to keep an eye out for those as they are even now starting to look as where's this going to go and what can we do in the future, because these people, the Palestinian people, in general, unfortunately, don't have a lot of friends. The evangelicals are against them. Most of the world's governments don't say anything. Even the Arab governments don't do anything. They say a lot of things, but they don't do anything to help. And these people are kind of out there on their own. So anybody who can be a friend to them, find a way to do that. And that's going to be the best kind of solidarity we can offer, I think.
We had some interesting dialogue going in the chat about the fact that, you know, we refer to this area as the Holy Land, which seems incredibly ironic right about now. And frankly, for the past millennia, where it's been contested land and, you know, land full of fighting so much, what are the pros and cons of calling it something else, you know, Israel, Palestine, or something other than the Holy Land? Or is the fact that it is in fact holy, sacred ground for the three Abrahamic religions reason to say it should always be the Holy Land and referred to as such?
Yeah, I think you'll get a lot of different opinions on that. Israel would say, oh, it's all Israel. You get Palestinians who say, well, it's all Palestine. You get the Vatican and most of the world, honestly, that says, well, it's Palestine and Israel. And the UN envisioned in 1948 that Jerusalem was supposed to be a separate entity. Because like you said, Gretchen, it is important to not only the three big monotheistic faiths, but it's also the center of the life for two peoples, the Palestinians and Israelis. So having international status under international protection would be the way to preserve that as a holy city, which I think for that would be the proper term. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. I did want to interject one thing before we go to you, Jeff, for your final comments, and that is that the P for persuasion and your recommendation to us that we make our voices heard. There will be an opportunity coming to everyone who has registered for tonight's talk in the form of a couple of letters that people could choose to sign on to and send to President Biden and to Secretary Blinken, doing exactly what you recommended, which is call for a ceasefire and call for peace. So, you know, that's an opportunity. And I think the APP is trying to, you know, make it maybe a little bit easier for people to be able to take action and make their voices heard. So just wanted to make sure everyone was aware that that opportunity will be coming your way tomorrow. So Jeff, wanted to turn over to you for some closing remarks before we wrap things up.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's great. You guys are doing the letters. I think please do. I know sometimes contacting our politicians can seem like a cop out, but I think it is going to make a difference. And the other thing, and the only thing I might say in closing here is that any other contacts you have, whether it's at universities or schools or with different religious orders or different, ministries or whatever, if you can promote the issue and get people thinking about it and talking about it, building awareness is going to help build solidarity, is going to help build change. And I hope that you'll think about what contacts you have, how you can input into those, and maybe make it more of a topic. And
Thank you.